Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this. Still not sure what this is, but... Wait, is that my phone going off? Holy crap. Mosh mosh, Roion desu. My lord, no, I have not forgotten all that Netflix has done for me. Yes, I'm still extremely grateful. I will talk about another Netflix original soon. How soon? I'll do it next week. Okay, sir, I'll do it tomorrow. No, sir, I'll do it today. I'll talk about the disastrous life of Saiki, or Saiki Kusuo no Ψ-nan, since you clearly speak Japanese, even though you're an American. But before I get started, I'd like to know why you decided to slap the Netflix original seal onto this anime when really all you did was buy the streaming rights. You're not credited on MAL at all. Oh, you guys are going to be producing a season 3. Well, then that's great. Will my earlier comment reflect poorly on me on my year-end review? No? Oh my god, you have my thanks, Mr. CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about Saiki Kusuo no Ψ-nan, or The Disastrous Life of Saiki, which is actually a really good English translation of Saiki Kusuo no Ψ-nan. In fact, it's almost a direct translation. The only issue I have with it though is that they weren't able to port over the Greek letter psi, as it doesn't appear in the English translation at all. Maybe they could have called it The Disastrous Life of the Psychic Saiki. So in the psychic they put the psi symbol, and that would make it really obvious that Saiki, his name, is a homophone for the word psychic, and that will let the audience know that they're going to watch an anime about a guy who's a psychic. Alright, so the fact that he's a psychic, he's instantly going to get compared to Mob Psycho, the other extremely popular anime following a high school boy with psychic powers. Does he have epic fights like Mob Psycho? No. Is he as strong as Mob Psycho? Well, he's even stronger, if you can believe that. Mob could probably, I'd say he could probably take over the world in about 6 months if he really put his mind to it, and a year tops if he really wasn't trying. But our boy Saiki, he has ungodly levels of strong. He has omniscient levels. For example, in anime, you see people with a lot of crazy hair, right? In anime, it's very typical to see people with crazy hair because the anime design is designed to be aesthetically pleasing. We like the big eyes, we like the small nose, we like virtually not seeing the ears at all. The only way to differentiate these perfect facial structures is to have stuff that doesn't really matter. For example, hair. We have crazy hair for our characters. Just look at Yu-Gi-Moto. They do stuff like that to differentiate from the anime style. But our main character Saiki, they have an in-lore reason for why people in this anime world have crazy hair. What Saiki did was, when he was born with a reddish hair, a weird pink purplish hair that you just wouldn't find in Japan. In Japan, people tend to have black or brown hair, and he felt really left out. So what he did as a kid was he rewrote the human genome on a base level across the globe so that crazier hair will appear in daily life, so he wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb in elementary school. Stuff like that is just insane. Like, his power levels are so high that it honestly doesn't make any sense for him to be challenged by anything whatsoever. Like, another good example is the fact that in humor anime, in comedy anime, just like this one, you see a lot of people get punched or they get beat up, and like you see a tooth fly out, and then somehow the next scene they're completely fine. Especially in kind of ecchi type shows, when the guy walks into the girl, he like gets a nosebleed and the girl punches him and somehow looks like he's dead, but he comes back to life. But in Saiki, they have another in-lore reason for why this is able to happen. He has rewritten the human genome again so that people can survive. Typically, more fatal injuries are not fatal anymore. He's made it so people have longer life expectancies. He's done a lot of stuff for humanity. So this kid, Saiki, he's pretty much God. So how can this character suffer any drawbacks? How can there be anything interesting? Do they pull kind of like an isekai power trip type anime deal where our main character is really just there to make the audience feel good about themselves as a self-insert? I mean, look at this guy. He's not self-expressive at all. In fact, he never moves his mouth. In the entire anime, the entire 1 to 2 seasons, our main character never moves his mouth. In fact, he never changes his facial expression either. So how do we get something interesting out of this? Well, it's because he's part of the audience. His powers are pretty much Deus Ex Machina, just waiting to happen. We're watching the anime through his eyes. Since he's a psychic, he can hear the voices of everyone else around him. The whole show is based upon the idea of theatrical irony, where the audience, or in this case Saiki, knows a key piece of information that no one else in the world knows. And each character that they introduce henceforth, each side character, each character that he gets to meet, encompasses a different form of theatrical irony that makes the show really work. The whole show is based upon comedy, so you won't find any epic fights. Even though Mob Psycho is technically a comedy according to one, you still find some epic shonen battles, and unfortunately you won't find it here. This show is really focused on the comedy side of things, which is why he's so omniscient. And for some of you, you're gonna hate it. You're not gonna like the comedy at all, but I'd still recommend you check this out. Alright, so before we get deep into the theatrical irony side of things, let's take a look at the MAL scores. And remember, the rule of thumb is to subtract 2 from the MAL score. That's going to give you a general idea of what the show is going to be worth. opening it up, we see an 8.5. Subtract 2, that's a 6.5. That's a great score. In fact, that's a score I would give this show. It's a score for a show that I would recommend to other anime watchers. Not necessarily people that have never seen anime before, like my mom. I wouldn't recommend this kind of anime to my mom, as a lot of the jokes are contingent on the fact that you've seen anime before. If you've never seen anime before, some of the jokes are definitely going to fly right over your head. A good example of theatrical irony, and this is our first character we're going to look at, Kaido Shun, and his whole deal is that he's a chunibyo. And if you've never seen anime before, you probably have no idea what a chunibyo is, but you've seen them out in the wild. A chunibyo is a type of person who does the Naruto run in real life. They're the kind of person who in elementary school like held out their hand and said, "Charge my Rasengan." Definitely not me, by the way. I definitely didn't do that. But if you're an elementary schooler, if you're kind of like early high school, that's still acceptable. You know, kids are supposed to be kind of cringy. Just look at Minecon. But if you're an adult and you're doing that kind of thing, that's when it kind of gets a little bit iffy. But our main character, Kaido Shun, he's in high school. He's like early high school here, and he's still super weeb. He's still spouting anime quotes and running around like a Narutard. So you would expect him to be kind of this vehicle for cringe humor. But unfortunately for you, Saiki is an amazing psychic, and because of that, he's able to make Kaido Shun's musings a reality. When Kaido casts chain lightning, when Kaido tries to use these crazy anime abilities, our main character Saiki kind of steps in and makes these things possible. He steps in and makes these things a reality, which is kind of where the humor comes from, because we as the audience, we know that he has no powers and this is all made up in his head. But to the other people in the world, they see him as an actual dark flame master. They see him as actually fighting an evil organization. But to us, we see it as kind of a huge joke. And it works for the most part. It actually works, and it's really, really funny to see it happen. I'm not sure if someone who's not seen anime can enjoy this type of humor at all though. The next character I'd like to talk about is Teruhashi Kokomi, and her whole deal is that she's extremely beautiful on the outside but kind of ugly on the inside. And because of this, our main character goes out of his way to avoid her. At first, that's kind of the angle to take with her, and the theatrical irony here is that we see that she is very ugly on the inside, and we see literally every dude in this show, with the exception of the main character, pines after her. But because our main character sees her for what she truly is, he goes out of his way to avoid her. But then eventually they kind of drop that deal and turn her more into this sweet girl who just plays off her own beauty a lot. I'm not sure why the writer decided to kind of throw away this kind of beautiful on the outside, ugly on the inside type deal. Instead, they changed her into more of a likable character, and they made her less ugly on the inside. Instead, she just is very aware of her own beauty, and she knows that she belongs on top. It's kind of insinuated later on that there's kind of a love triangle between our main character and another girl and Teruhashi Kokomi. But for the most part, it works. And for the first season, when they really play the whole theatrical irony side of her, it works really, really well. And this is why I really liked her character in season 1. In season 2, maybe not so much, but we'll talk about season 2 in general later. The next character is Nendo Riki. His whole deal is that he is so dumb. He's so stupid that our main character, despite being able to read minds and is virtually omniscient, he can't read his mind. And because of that, Nendo Riki is a vehicle for more typical humor that you would find anywhere else. He doesn't encompass any form of theatrical irony. He's just really spontaneous and is there to push the plot forward or make these crazy happenings possible. The next character is what I meant when I think you need kind of an anime background to enjoy this anime. His name is Hiro Kenishi, and Hiro Kenishi, his whole job is to become a caricature of Hinata from Haikyuu. Or not just Haikyuu, he's a caricature of your typical sports anime main character. You know, the type of character in sports animes who are really, really into that specific sport, who like do everything and really chow down on that teamwork whole angle. They're always really, really high tension. Those types of characters. This is what Hiro Kenishi is there supposed to represent, and he's always training. Like, you can see him in the background just lifting weights randomly, always trying his best, and he's there to kind of juxtapose our main character who's trying his best to kind of hold his powers in check. He's always trying his best to appear average and not to appear like some kind of god level omniscient psychic. It works for the most part because the theatrical irony here is we see Hiro trying really, really hard and people seeing him try really hard, and our main character Saiki, who needs to try to not try so hard in order to remain kind of obscure in the background. Alright, so let's talk transfer students now. Yes, I know there are some characters I have not touched upon, but that's because I want you to go check out the show. The show's great. I highly recommend you check it out. If you made it this far into the video, you should go and check out the rest of these characters, and they each encompass their own version of theatrical irony. I'll leave it up to you to determine which type of theatrical irony they exhibit. But when a show introduces a transfer student, it's because the plot is starting to get stale and they're adding a new character to spice things up a bit. And this can work, you know, there's nothing wrong with adding in new characters. I mean, Death Note does it all the time. But if you add too many characters, it could be a problem. And the first one they add, it's alright. His name is Toritsuka Reita, and he finds out our main character is a psychic because he himself is a psychic. He kind of does his own little thing. He's there for more fan service type deal because he's a super pervert. But the next one I want to talk about is Kobayasu Aren, and this is the point at which they realize they introduced too many friends for our main character, and he kind of gets sidelined a lot. As Kobayasu Aren, his whole deal is that he has a very dark past, as he used to be a hardcore delinquent who had the pompadour and who rode a motorcycle, you know, the whole 9 yards. And our main character Saiki, because he can read minds, he sees the subtleness in Kobayasu Aren's action. He sees like his super muscular build. He sees him like grabbing a lead pipe on occasion to beat someone up and then dropping and being like, oh crap, I shouldn't start these fights because I don't want to be a delinquent anymore. The theatrical irony here is because we know that he's a hardcore delinquent and the rest of everyone else just sees him as a regular guy who has weird quirks like picking up lead pipes, stuff like that. When he first gets introduced, he gets a few good scenes, and after that he kind of gets sidelined, and this is really when things start going downhill for the show, because it's around this point that season 1 ends, and season 1 as a whole is really good. It only adds 2 side characters for a whole 24 episodes. Only adding 2 side characters is a really good deal, as they're able to do a lot with the characters they have. But then season 2 is when things start taking a weird point. Like, I'd still say season 2 is worth checking out if you sat through all of season 1, but season 2 is definitely a dip in quality as the writer starts running out of ideas and they start introducing a ton of side characters. The characters even reference the fact that there's just so many transfer students in their school. It's starting to become ridiculous. But before I get into the why season 2 is kind of bad, I'd like to talk about the animation. And yes, this show is animated by JC Staff. I know JC Staff has kind of become a meme in these recent months as a result of One Punch Man season 2, letting in these normies that have never seen JC Staff animate stuff before, coming out of the woodwork and saying, whoa man, One Punch Man season 2 is so bad. JC Staff has always been trash. But JC Staff has not always been trash. JC Staff, they're known for picking up a lot of properties, and because of that, they kind of split their budget and their manpower amongst tons of properties. And yes, the animation suffers because of this. And yes, it's a little bit bad, but JC Staff, whenever they do kind of these slice of life type animes where they don't need to animate crazy fight scenes like One Punch Man season 2, it works, okay? The animation in The Disastrous Life of Saiki, it works. It's not too bad, it's not terrible. It has some good action scenes, but for the most part, because it's a comedy series and because it's a slice of life anime, JC Staff does do it justice. So there's no One Punch Man season 2 JC Staff meme to be found here, okay? And that's all I have to say about the animation. It's also done in partnership with another animation studio that's done Endoro. That's the only show I know that they've done other than this show in particular. Alright, let's talk season 2 now. So season 2 is when the writer really starts running out of ideas as he slots in tons and tons and tons of transfer students just to use them once, ring them out, and then throw them away. Our first example is Ayura Mikoto, who's a gyaru. You know, aesthetic wise, I really like her design, but she's kind of given a non-role. She doesn't show up enough in the show in my opinion. Maybe it's because I liked her a lot, but they don't really use her much after the first time when she's introduced. And then they show up this other guy called Akechi Toma, whose whole deal is that he talks a lot. If you're reading a manga, it can work, right? You see a character who has like huge bubbles and lines of text, that's where the joke comes from. But if you're watching an anime with subtitles, like this is what I mean when this kind of localization doesn't work in English. Like when you're watching anime, these jokes won't work because of that kind of language barrier. And because he talks a lot, the subtitles are just dominated by his text, and reading it is such a pain in the ass. I hated every scene with Akechi Toma. His whole talking a lot deal works if you were, say, Japanese and you didn't have to read subtitles, but because I have to read subtitles and he talks so fast, I have no idea what he's saying, and the joke really just goes over my head. Eventually I started skipping every scene that he started popping up in, and he doesn't work out at all for kind of an international audience. Maybe he works better if you understood the Japanese dub or they dubbed the show in English. By the way, they only dubbed the first season of this show in English. I'm not sure why they didn't dub the second season, and the dub is not bad, okay? I'm not the type of guy to just throw out a dub because it's a dub. You know, I'll sit through one episode of the dub and see if it's worth your time, and yeah, it's not too bad. The voice acting, the delivery is not terrible. The script writing actually adapts the jokes pretty well, but there are some jokes that require a Japanese background. For example, in one of the episodes, they visit Okinawa, and for those of you who don't know, Okinawa, because it's a small island in Japan, so Japan is made up by a bunch of islands, right? It's actually a small island down south of Japan, and because of this, they've been isolated from the mainland for so long that their dialect, their type of Japanese has changed a lot. A lot of the jokes that happened during that episode when they visit Okinawa comes from the fact that the Okinawans speak different Japanese from the people who live in Tokyo, like our main character. And I'm not sure how they could localize that properly be in English. It must have been a complete nightmare to localize that episode. A lot of the jokes need to be in Japanese for you to understand them. A lot of them make a lot of references to Japanese culture, which is why I would recommend you watch this show in Japanese, not English. Like, I'm not hating on the English dub here, not to mention the fact that season 2 isn't dubbed at all. They just gave up. Season 2, Netflix just gave up upon dubbing the show, which is strange because normally Netflix dubs every anime they have, just in case like a normie like your mom or someone picks up the remote and decides to watch an anime for God knows what reason. So after Akechi Toma, they introduced Rifta Imu, and then they introduced Metori Saiko, and this is really when the show starts scraping the bottom of the barrel, because Rifta Imu, her whole deal is she's like a competitor to Teruhashi Kokomi. She's another extremely pretty character who is kind of ugly on the inside, and they've already done that before, and they try and give her a redemption arc. They try to make her more likable. She's supposed to be kind of the original Teruhashi Kokomi, back when Kokomi was actually really ugly on the inside, and instead of just being this kind of likable girl, but she's actually unlikable. She's kind of encompassing the original theatrical irony of the Teruhashi Kokomi in season 1. And then the other character, Metori Saiko, he's a really spoiled rich kid who wants to be liked, and that's where the theatrical irony comes from. But he's more of a vehicle for JoJo references. If you haven't noticed already, he looks like Kishibe Rohan. They even give him the Daga Kotowaru line. They give him the I refuse line from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4. He's there as kind of a vehicle for JoJo references, and that's when you know the show is kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, which is not surprising as the manga, I heard, ended relatively soon. It ended at about 2018. It ended last year, sometime last year. The writer was just running out of ideas, and it shows. But for the most part, season 1 is really well done, and if you enjoyed season 1, I'd still recommend checking out season 2 just for kind of these love story subplot. I'll admit it, the love story subplots did get me, and I was kind of interested in the Ayura Mikoto Gyaru and the Teruhashi Kokomi love triangle with our main character Saiki. I'll admit it, these love triangles, they got to me. I ended up watching the show for some of this, in addition to the whole comedy and theatrical irony type deal. Anyways, if you made this far in the video, please like and subscribe, and tell me what you think about Saiki Kusuo no Sai-nan in the comments. Let me know if you actually heard about this anime before I talked about it, as not many people seem to talk about Saiki Kusuo no Sai-nan despite it being so good and so recent. I find more people talking about comic girls than this show, which is kind of strange. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time.
Bonjour, Mr. Hastings, it is time. Ibutawan, your subscription. Never move anime from the platform and leave the whips out in the cold. Get to it.